Let's talk about something most of us have felt but rarely understand while we're experiencing it. The weight of isolation. That deep, unshakable feeling of being set apart, like the world has gone quiet around you. Maybe you're in the middle of it now, wondering why the people who once stood by you seem distant, or why the opportunities you thought were right in front of you suddenly feel just out of reach. But what if I told you this period of isolation isn't a punishment? What if instead it's a necessary step before something greater unfolds in your life? Isolation is one of life's paradoxes. At first glance, it feels like rejection, like the world is shutting you out. But in truth, isolation is often an invitation, a call to prepare yourself for something bigger, something better. It's not the end of a journey, but the beginning of a transformation. When life pulls you away from the familiar, it's creating the space you need to grow. That's the thing about isolation. It isn't a punishment, it's a process. Think about the moments in your life when you felt most alone. Maybe it was after a significant loss, a breakup, or a career setback. In those moments, it's easy to feel like you've been abandoned or forgotten. But what if those moments were life's way of pressing pause, forcing you to stop and take a deeper look at where you are and where you're going? When everything else is stripped away, the noise, the distractions, the opinions of others, you're left with one thing, yourself. And that's where the real work begins. In isolation, you're given a chance to reset. It's an opportunity to strip away the layers of who you thought you needed to be and reconnect with who you truly are. When the world quiets down, you start to hear your own thoughts more clearly. You begin to notice patterns in your life, the ones that help you and the ones that hold you back. Isolation is the place where self-awareness is born. It's where you start to ask yourself the big questions. What do I truly want? What kind of person do I want to become? And perhaps most importantly, what am I willing to let go of to make room for the life I'm meant to live? Growth doesn't happen in comfort. It happens in the uncomfortable, in the moments when you feel like you're stretched to your limits. And isolation is uncomfortable, no doubt about it. But it's also necessary. It's in the quiet moments, the moments of solitude, where you learn to rely on your own strength, your own resilience. You learn to trust yourself. You stop looking to others for validation or approval because in isolation, there's no one else to lean on but you. One of the most significant things isolation teaches us is patience. We live in a world that celebrates instant gratification. We want everything now, the success, the recognition, the relationships. But life doesn't work that way. Real growth takes time. Seeds don't sprout overnight. They're planted in the dark, buried in the soil, and left to grow unseen. It's only after they've taken root, after they've gathered the strength to push through the surface, that they finally break through and bloom. Isolation is the soil. It's the place where your roots grow deeper, where you build the foundation for the blessings that are yet to come. But here's the thing. Isolation isn't passive. It's not about sitting back and waiting for life to happen to you. It's about doing the work. It's about using the time you've been given to prepare yourself for what's next. That means letting go of the things that no longer serve you, the toxic relationships, the limiting beliefs, the habits that keep you stuck. It means embracing the discomfort, knowing that it's a sign you're on the edge of something new. It's also about learning to trust the process. When you're in the middle of isolation, it can feel like nothing is happening, like you're stuck in a holding pattern. But what you don't see is the work being done beneath the surface. Just because you can't see the progress doesn't mean it's not there. Trust that life has a plan for you, even if you can't see it yet. Trust that the isolation you're feeling is part of that plan, a necessary step on the journey to where you're meant to be. And when the time comes, when the isolation ends and the blessings begin to unfold, you'll look back on this period with gratitude. You'll realize that the time you spent in solitude wasn't wasted, it was essential. It prepared you for the opportunities you're now ready to embrace. It gave you the strength, the clarity, and the resilience to step into your purpose. If you're in a season of isolation right now, don't fight it, embrace it, use it, let it transform you. Because the truth is, isolation isn't a sign that you're being left behind. It's a sign that you're being prepared for something greater. And when those blessings arrive, you'll be ready to receive them. You'll be stronger, wiser, and more aligned with the person you're meant to be. And that in itself is the greatest blessing of all. When life places you in a season of isolation, it can feel like an endless echo of your own thoughts and fears. It's unnerving, even intimidating, to face yourself without the comfort of distractions or the noise of the outside world. But what if I told you that this season isn't about punishment? It's about revelation. Isolation forces you to confront the one person you've been avoiding, yourself. And in that confrontation, you find the truth of who you are, who you've been, and most importantly, who you want to become. Let's think about this for a moment. We spend so much of our lives reacting to the world around us, keeping up with demands, meeting expectations, responding to challenges. Rarely do we pause to ask, am I moving in the direction I truly want? Am I living according to my own values or someone else's agenda? Is isolation demands that we stop, look inward, and answer these questions? It's not easy. In fact, it can be one of the hardest things you'll ever do, but it's also one of the most transformative. Facing yourself means acknowledging the parts of you that you may have buried or ignored. It's about digging into the uncomfortable truths, the habits, beliefs, and fears that have shaped your decisions. It's about recognizing the patterns that no longer serve you and having the courage to break them. This process isn't about judgment or self-criticism. It's about self-awareness. It's about holding a mirror up to yourself and saying, this is me, the good, the bad, and the in-between. This kind of introspection requires honesty, and honesty can be tough. It might mean admitting that you've been chasing goals that don't truly fulfill you. It might mean acknowledging that you've been holding on to relationships that drain you more than they uplift you. It might mean facing fears that have kept you from pursuing your dreams. But here's the thing. You can't change what you don't acknowledge. Leadership. And isolation gives you the space to see clearly what needs to change. When you face yourself, you also discover your strength. You realize that you are capable of more than you thought. The doubts and insecurities that once seemed so overwhelming begin to lose their power. Why? Because you've taken the time to understand them. You've shone a light on them. And in doing so, you've robbed them of their ability to control you. This is the power of self-awareness. It doesn't eliminate your challenges, but it equips you to face them with clarity and confidence. Let's not overlook the importance of forgiveness in this process. Facing yourself often means confronting past mistakes and regrets. It's easy to fall into the trap of self-blame, to replay moments where you wish you'd acted differently. But isolation isn't about punishing yourself for the past. It's about learning from it. It's about offering yourself the same grace and understanding you'd extend to a friend. Forgive yourself for the times you fell short. Recognize that those moments don't define you. They're simply chapters in your story, and your story is far from over. Once you've faced yourself, you begin to see possibilities where before there were only obstacles. You start to envision a future that aligns with your values and aspirations. You identify the steps you need to take to move closer to that future, and most importantly, you take ownership of your journey. You stop waiting for circumstances to change or for someone else to save you. You realize that the power to transform your life has been within you all along. But this transformation doesn't happen overnight. It's a process, one that requires patience and persistence. There will be moments when you doubt yourself, moments when the old patterns try to pull you back. That's normal. Growth isn't a straight line. It's a series of steps forward and back. What matters is that you keep moving. What matters is that you don't let the fear of facing yourself stop you from becoming the person you're meant to be. So if you find yourself in a season of isolation, don't resist it. Lean into it. Use it as an opportunity to reconnect with yourself. Ask the hard questions. Sit with the uncomfortable truths. Do the work of understanding and accepting yourself, because on the other side of that work is freedom. The freedom to live authentically, the freedom to pursue your purpose, the freedom to step into the life you've always wanted. Isolation isn't easy, but it is necessary. It's the bridge between who you are and who you're becoming. And when you cross that bridge, you'll find that the person waiting on the other side is stronger, wiser, and more at peace with themselves. That's the gift of isolation. It strips away the distractions and leaves you with the most important relationship you'll ever have, the one you have with yourself. We've all heard the saying, it's lonely at the top, but no one talks about the loneliness on the way up. Before the breakthrough, before the success, there's often a quiet, isolating phase, a period where you feel disconnected, misunderstood, and even doubted by those around you. This is a test, not just of your patience, but of your belief in your path. It's the universe asking you, how badly do you want this? And in that isolation lies an opportunity to redefine your relationship with yourself and your goals. You see, when you're pursuing something meaningful, something that isn't ordinary, it's only natural that your journey won't be ordinary either. You start to notice the distance between you and the people who used to walk beside you. Conversations that once felt engaging now feel shallow. The interests you shared no longer align. It's as if your focus on growth creates an invisible barrier. But this isn't rejection, it's redirection. It's life clearing space for the right people, the right opportunities, and the right energy to enter. Isolation is uncomfortable because it forces us to confront the parts of ourselves that have been hidden behind the noise of everyday life. It strips away the external validation we often rely on to feel confident, leaving us face to face with our inner voice. That voice can be brutal. It will question you, challenge you, and sometimes even mock your ambitions. But this is where you grow. This is where you learn to trust yourself, to silence the doubts, and to move forward even when the path is unclear. Think about it. In those quiet moments of isolation, what are you left with? You're left with your purpose. You're left with the clarity of why you started in the first place. When the crowd isn't there to cheer you on, you find out if your why is strong enough to keep you going. This is the moment where you separate yourself from the noise and reconnect with the vision that made you take the first step. It's not about proving others wrong, it's about proving yourself right. During this period, there's a temptation to retreat, to shrink back into the comfort of what's familiar. The fear of missing out on connections, conversations, and camaraderie can be overwhelming, but what if I told you that this time of solitude is a gift? It's a sacred space for you to refine your skills, strengthen your mindset, and lay the foundation for the future you're building. It's not a step backward, it's a setup for your next leap forward. Let's take a closer look at what isolation teaches you. First, it forces you to prioritize. When you're alone, you have to decide what truly matters. Is it the short-term gratification of fitting in, or is it the long-term fulfillment of living authentically? Isolation helps you realize that not everyone is meant to come with you on your journey. Some relationships are seasonal. They were there to teach you something, to support you through a specific phase of your life. And that's okay. Letting go of people who no longer align with your path isn't an act of cruelty, it's an act of self-respect. And if you find yourself in a season of isolation, don't resist it, embrace it. Use it as a time to grow, to learn, and to prepare. Because when the blessings arrive, you won't just be ready, you'll be worthy. And you'll look back on this period not with regret, but with gratitude. Gratitude for the silence that allowed you to hear your inner voice. Gratitude for the distance that gave you perspective. And gratitude for the solitude that shaped you into the person you were always meant to be. Isolation, especially when pursuing a goal or chasing a dream, often comes with a profound sense of vulnerability. It's that uncomfortable realization that you're no longer operating in the familiar territory of shared experiences and predictable paths. Instead, you're venturing into the unknown, where the safety net of validation is stripped away. But here's the thing. Vulnerability, though uncomfortable, is where transformation truly begins. It's in those moments of exposure, when the walls you've built around yourself start to crack, that you discover the strength you didn't even know you had. When you're isolated, there's no place to hide from your fears, insecurities, or doubts. They come rushing to the surface, demanding to be faced. And while that might seem terrifying, it's also an opportunity. Vulnerability doesn't mean weakness, it means authenticity. It means standing in your truth, even when it feels like the ground beneath you is shaking. And in this truth lies your greatest power, the ability to own your story, unfiltered and unapologetic. You see, the world often teaches us to mask our vulnerabilities, to project an image of strength and perfection. But this mask is heavy, and over time, it weighs us down. When you're isolated, that mask begins to slip. And while it might feel like a loss, it's actually a liberation. Without the need to perform or impress, you're free to explore who you really are. You're free to ask yourself the hard questions. What do I truly want? What am I willing to sacrifice to get there? And most importantly, am I living in alignment with my values? In this phase, vulnerability becomes a mirror. It reflects not just your fears, but also your aspirations. It reminds you of what's at stake and why you started in the first place. And as you confront these truths, something remarkable happens. You begin to build resilience. Resilience isn't the absence of fear or doubt. It's the ability to move forward despite them. It's the realization that your worth isn't tied to external validation, but rooted in your inner conviction. The beauty of vulnerability is that it also fosters connection. Not immediately, but eventually. When you embrace your own humanity, you create space for others to do the same. You start to attract people who resonate with your authenticity, who see you not as someone pretending to have it all together, but as someone brave enough to admit they don't. These connections are deeper, more meaningful, and more aligned with the person you're becoming. But before these connections manifest, there's a period of solitude where the work happens. This is where you learn to sit with discomfort without rushing to fix it. It's where you develop the courage to face your flaws without judgment. And it's where you begin to rewrite the narrative you've been telling yourself. Instead of seeing vulnerability as a liability, you start to see it as a strength. Instead of fearing isolation, you start to embrace it as a catalyst for growth. Let me share something important about this process. It's not linear. There will be days when you feel like you're making progress, and then there will be days when the doubts creep back in. That's okay. Growth isn't about perfection, it's about persistence. It's about showing up for yourself, even when it's hard. The irony is that the very vulnerability you fear is the thing that will ultimately set you free. It's what allows you to let go of the need for approval, to release the fear of judgment, and to step into your power. When you stop trying to be what the world expects and start being who you truly are, you unlock a level of confidence that can't be shaken. Because it's not rooted in external factors, it's rooted in your truth. And here's the best part. When you come out on the other side of this phase, you'll realize that the isolation wasn't a punishment, it was a preparation. It was life's way of clearing the clutter so you could focus on what truly matters. It was a reminder that the path to greatness is often a solitary one, but it's also one that leads to the most profound sense of fulfillment. So if you find yourself in a season of isolation, don't resist it. Lean into it. Allow yourself to feel the discomfort, to sit with the uncertainty, and to embrace the vulnerability, because in doing so, you're not just surviving, you're evolving. And when the world finally catches up to the version of you that's been forged in this solitude, they'll see someone who isn't just strong, but unshakable. And someone who didn't just endure the journey, but emerged from it transformed. Growth rarely comes without struggle. It's not convenient, it's not neat, and it's certainly not easy. When you find yourself isolated, it can feel like the universe has hit pause, pulling you away from the noise and the crowds. At first, it might feel lonely, even unfair. But the truth is, isolation often creates the conditions needed for clarity. It's a pause, a reset, a deliberate moment where you are forced to sit with yourself and your thoughts, stripped of distractions. And while it's tempting to resent this solitude, it might just be the greatest gift you've been given. When everything slows down and the outside world seems distant, you're left with an opportunity that's hard to come by in the chaos of daily life, the chance to focus. And not just any kind of focus, but deep, intentional focus on the things that matter most to you. You begin to sift through the noise, peeling back the layers of superficial concerns and identifying what's truly important. In that quiet, the vision becomes, you begin to reconnect with your goals, not as distant dreams, but as tangible, actionable paths forward. Isolation isn't about shutting the world out. It's about creating space to listen to the voice within. It's the space where your mind can declutter and your heart can realign. You see, when you're surrounded by constant input, other people's opinions, social media, the news, your own voice can get drowned out. In the stillness of isolation, that voice becomes audible again. And more than that, it becomes powerful. You start to remember what drives you, what excites you, and why you started down this path in the first place. But here's the thing. Focus isn't just about identifying your goals. It's also about identifying what doesn't serve you anymore. This is the hard part, because focusing on what matters also means cutting out the distractions, the toxic habits, and sometimes even the relationships that pull you away from your purpose. It's not easy to say no to things that once felt comfortable or familiar, but growth demands it. Focusing isn't just about addition, it's about subtraction. It's about creating space for the things that align with your vision and letting go of the rest. This process can feel like pruning a tree. At first, it looks like you're cutting away so much that you might not be left with much. But over time, you realize that by removing what's unnecessary, you've allowed the essential to thrive. Isolation forces you to confront these choices head-on, and while it's uncomfortable, it's also transformative. You're no longer just going through the motions, you're being deliberate about where you put your energy and attention. One of the most beautiful things about this phase of isolation is that it reveals the depth of your potential. When you're no longer distracted by the superficial or pulled in a million different directions, you begin to see what you're truly capable of. You start to make progress that once seemed impossible. You build momentum, and as you focus, that momentum compounds, turning small victories into significant breakthroughs. There's a common misconception that focus means narrowing your view, that by concentrating on one thing, you're closing yourself off to others. But that's not the case. Focus doesn't mean limitation, it means intention. It's not about saying no to everything, it's about saying yes to the right things. It's about aligning your energy with your priorities so that every step you take moves you closer to where you want to go. In isolation, and to see the world not as it is, but as it could be. Your vision sharpens. You're no longer overwhelmed by the opinions of others or the distractions of the day-to-day. Instead, you're guided by a clear sense of purpose. And when you have that clarity, every decision becomes easier. It's not about what's popular or easy. It's about what's right for you. And here's the secret. When you emerge from this phase of isolation, that focus doesn't go away. It becomes a part of who you are. It shapes how you move through the world, how you make decisions, and how you navigate challenges. The distractions that once seemed so overwhelming lose their power over you. The opinions that once swayed you no longer carry weight. You're grounded in your vision, anchored by your purpose, and driven by a deep sense of conviction. Isolation, though challenging, is a season of preparation. It's not a punishment, but a process. It's life's way of giving you the time and space to hone your focus, align your energy, and step into your potential. So embrace it, use it, and when you finally step out into the world again, let them see the power of someone who's not just focused, but unstoppable. Resilience is one of the most undervalued qualities in our journey towards success. It's not something we're born with, it's something we cultivate. The truth is, the hardest moments in life are not meant to break us, but to mold us into something stronger, sharper, and more prepared for what lies ahead. When you feel isolated, when the world seems distant, it's easy to believe that you're stuck or that you've been left behind. But that isolation is often the training ground for resilience. It's where we learn to bend without breaking, to adapt without losing ourselves, and to rise no matter how many times we fall. Resilience begins with perspective. Too often we view challenges as obstacles meant to stop us, but what if we saw them as opportunities instead? Think about it. Every setback, every failure, and every moment of doubt is a chance to grow. It's a chance to prove to yourself that you are capable of more than you think. The key is not to avoid adversity, but to embrace it, to see it as a necessary part of the journey, not as a sign that you're on the wrong path. This perspective shift doesn't come naturally. It takes intentional effort. It's about reframing your thoughts, catching yourself when you're spiraling into negativity, and choosing to see the possibility instead of the problem. It's about reminding yourself that every storm eventually passes, and that the growth you gain from weathering it will be worth every drop of rain. Resilience also demands self-awareness. In isolation, you're forced to confront your thoughts, your fears, and your weaknesses head on. There's no hiding, no distractions to pull your attention away. And while that can feel uncomfortable, it's also empowering. Because when you understand yourself, your triggers, your strengths, and your limits, you become better equipped to navigate the challenges ahead. You stop reacting impulsively and start responding intentionally. You begin to trust yourself, even when the path forward isn't clear. But here's the thing, resilience isn't about going it alone. It's about knowing when to lean on others, when to ask for help, and when to admit that you don't have all the answers. Too often, we equate resilience with independence, with pushing through on our own, no matter what. But true resilience recognizes the power of connection. It's about building a support system of people who believe in you, who challenge you, and who remind you of your worth when you forget it yourself. But resilience is not just about enduring, it's about thriving. It's about using the lessons learned in the hardest moments to build a life that aligns with your values, your goals, and your vision. It's about proving to yourself, time and time again, that you are stronger than you think, braver than you feel, and more capable than you can imagine. When you look back on the moments that tested you, you'll realize that they weren't just obstacles, they were turning points. They were the moments that shaped you, that revealed your character, and that prepared you for the blessings that were waiting on the other side. So when you feel isolated, when the world feels heavy, and when you're tempted to give up, remember this: resilience isn't about avoiding the struggle. It's about rising through it. So it's about becoming the person you were meant to be, not despite the challenges, but because of them. And that is where true strength lies. Life often places us in seasons of isolation before ushering us into seasons of blessings. This isn't punishment, it's preparation. These moments of solitude are not meant to break us, but to build us. They teach us resilience, foster clarity, and ignite a deeper understanding of our purpose. It is in the quiet, in the struggle, and in the waiting that we are refined into the people capable of carrying the blessings we seek. When you feel the weight of isolation, remember that it's temporary. Like a seed planted in the dark soil, your growth is happening even when you cannot see it. Trust the process, even when it feels slow. Embrace the lessons, even when they're hard. And have faith that the isolation you experience now is clearing the way for something far greater. A life that aligns with your values, your dreams, and your purpose. And the path to blessings is not a straight road. It's a journey of highs and lows, of steps forward and moments of stillness. But in every step, you're becoming the person you need to be for what's ahead. Hold on to hope, keep walking, and trust that the season of isolation is simply preparing you for the abundance waiting on the other side.